Call me Ishmael. Some years ago, never mind how long precisely, having little or no money in my purse, and nothing particular to interest me on shore, I thought I would sail about a little and see the watery part of the world.
Herman Melville, the author of Moby Dick, worked on a whaling ship as a harpoonist, literally at the sharp end of that gruesome business. And he took those experiences of life at sea and combined them with a love of William Shakespeare and the King James Bible to create a great American novel about obsession and compulsion. Moby Dick pre-empts the work of Freud and Jung and the very modern quest to understand the psychology of the human mind. And it is just as much a story of the inner journey to the recesses of the human psyche as it is a journey across the vast blue oceans. Moby Dick is a complex, metaphysical novel that looks for philosophy in whales and for poetry in blubber. Herman Melville was born in 1819 to a wealthy and close-knit family in New York City. But after they lost all their money in the financial panic of 1837, and their father died, the young Melville was taken out of his life of privilege and put to work. There was a history of men going to sea in Melville's family, and his elder brother enrolled Herman as a cabin boy on a ship bound for Liverpool. For the next 5 years, Melville works at sea, including a spell on a whaling vessel in the Bahamas as a harpoonist. On average, 40 whales were killed per whaling trip, and each 40 to 60-ton whale took 3 days to cut, boil, and dissect, to produce 1,600 barrels of oil. It was a grueling, visceral, and back-breaking life. But Melville knew what it was like to be a whaler, and he knew what it was to travel. In the 19th century, whaling was the 5th largest industry in America, with 70% of the world's whaling fleets based in the US, largely in the New England ports of Nantucket and New Bedford, which is where Moby Dick starts. The products of whaling were a big part of everyday life. Whale oil was the main source of lighting in homes and a lubricant for factory machinery, a driving force in the rapid industrial expansion of America. For a period, whaling really was a key component of the US economy on a scale that's hard for us to comprehend nowadays. Whales, quite literally, gave America light.
For almost all the tapers, lamps, and candles that burn round the globe burn as before so many shrines, to our glory.
After a series of adventures overseas, including a period of mutiny and travelling as far as Tahiti, Melville comes back eventually to the United States and settles down to write a series of novels over a short period that, broadly speaking, derive from this experience. At first reading, Moby Dick has a very simple plot. It's the story of two men. Ahab, the captain of the ship, is bent on taking revenge on the white whale that bit off his leg, and Ishmael, the narrator, is a man who takes to the sea in a quest for knowledge. Somehow, from this simple premise, Melville builds a novel, epic in scale and ambition, even while the bulk of the action in the book is observed from the confines of a 19th century whaling boat. Shakespeare, who Melville referred to as the Divine William, was a huge influence on Moby Dick, which shares thematic elements with Shakespearean tragedies like King Lear and Macbeth, particularly the motif of revenge.
To the last, I grapple with thee. From hell's heart, I stab at thee. For hate's sake, I spit my last breath at thee.
Ahab's speech often comes across as a Shakespearean soliloquy, and Melville frequently uses what appear to be stage directions.
And God had prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah.
The King James Bible is probably the most influential book in 19th century American literature, readily available and widely read. and Moby Dick is undoubtedly a religious novel. One way to look at the book is through the names of the characters. In the Bible, Ishmael is a wanderer who was cast away from his family. Is our narrator choosing to identify with the outcast? Similarly, Ahab is the name of the evil king who led the Israelites into a life of idolatry and away from the true God. And Melville's Ahab is a man obsessed by the white whale as if it were an idol, and his obsession leads him and his crew down the path of destruction. The ship that rescues Ishmael at the end of the book is called the Rachel, and in the book of Jeremiah, it is Rachel who convinces God to end the exile of the Jewish tribes for their worshipping of false idols. In its role in saving Ishmael, the Rachel can be seen as helping him return to the true path. So the religious allusions start with, "Call me Ishmael," and they go all the way through to the Jonah and the whale sermon, to the book of Job references in the epilogue.
Call me Ishmael.
Ishmael is the first-person narrator of the book, which opens with one of the best-known phrases in English literature. But it's a line with its own ambiguity. Is our narrator actually named Ishmael, or is this simply what he wants us to call him? These three words set up the thematic framework of the book and introduces Melville's broader interest in the limits of knowledge and the vagaries of interpretation. While Ishmael is a man of democratic instincts, Captain Ahab represents the dictator. Considering he has such a dominating and towering presence in the book, Ahab doesn't appear until chapter 68. Having said that, some chapters are only a page or two long. Before he even appears, we know Ahab is ungodly, in that he refuses to submit to any higher power, and refuses to acknowledge the superiority of forces beyond himself. He is described in the book as grand, ungodly, godlike. And perhaps, it is suggested, he even wants to be God. Like mankind itself, Ahab is determined to dominate nature, to prove his supremacy, and to impose his will on the outside world. And sometimes it is the crew who must jump at his orders, and sometimes it is the whale itself. A whale that is effectively indifferent to him. When he does finally appear, the ship is heaving with tension, and the narrator Ishmael remarks that he appears both old and strong, bronzed and rugged, with a scar across his face. But it is ruthlessness that cuts through.
There was an infinity of firmest fortitude, a determinate, unsurrenderable willfulness in the fixed and fearless forward dedication of that glance.
Ahab is a man of great depth, but few words, and when he speaks, others listen. His skill is the ability to reach into the hearts and minds of these jaded sailors and persuade them to make his quest their quest. But like the hero of a Shakespearean tragedy, he has a single flaw that will ultimately destroy him. It is not Moby Dick that kills him, but his obsessive desire for revenge. Ahab may be fighting the great white whale, or nature, or God, but he is also fighting Ahab. Of all the possible readings, it is the ones around the whale itself which are the most striking, and they range from seeing it as standing in for the Judeo-Christian God to a comment on slavery, a critique of imperialism, atheism itself, and everything in between. Unlike the human characters in the book, Moby Dick is largely unknowable to us. For some scholars, this unknowability has led them to suggest the whale is an allegorical representation of God, an inscrutable and all-powerful force that must be lived with.
Is it that by its indefiniteness it shadows forth the heartless voids and immensities of the universe, and thus stabs us from behind with the thought of annihilation? Or is it that as in essence, whiteness is not so much a color as the visible absence of color?
This whole chapter is Ishmael speculating on the meaning of Moby Dick's whiteness. Is it a symbol of good or evil, glory or damnation, or simply a blank screen on which to project your own beliefs? Ultimately, there is no clear answer, The whale is the unknown.
Better sleep with a sober cannibal than a drunken Christian.
Much is made of the bond between Ishmael, our narrator, and the tattooed Pacific Islander Pequod. Early in the book, they are thrown together, not only having to share a room for the night at the inn, but a bed. And indeed, when they wake up in the morning, their relationship is described as like a marriage.
He pressed his forehead against mine, clasped me around the waist, and said that henceforth we were married, meaning, in his country's phrase, that we were bosom friends. He would gladly die for me if need should be.
While the extent of their relationship as a reflection on their sexuality can be debated, these are the deep male onboard friendships that Melville describes, where the crew spend years together, sleeping cheek by jowl in extremely confined conditions. Close bonds form out of a mutual dependence in a space where, as Melville points out, merit, rather than race or wealth, determines a man's status.
It is only his outside. A man can be honest in any kind of skin.
In the book, Melville describes the minutiae of whaling as a visceral, gut-churning business. The carcass, or leviathan, takes over the whole ship, as blubber, blood, and guts spill into the ocean, and the flames of the furnace are likened to hell. But Melville also imbues the crew's labours with dignity and tenderness. In chapter 94, A Squeeze of the Hand, Ishmael touchingly recounts how he and the sailors squeeze the spermaceti, a waxy substance inside a sperm whale's head. Ishmael is carried away with enthusiasm for the sweet and unctuous duty, and while squeezing the substance, Ishmael finds himself also squeezing his shipmates' hands.
I was continually squeezing their hands and looking up into their eyes sentimentally, as much as to say, "Oh, my dear fellow beings, why should we longer cherish any social acerbities, or know the slightest ill humor or envy?"
The ship that Ahab captains, the Pequod, was named for the Pequot tribe of Native Americans who were massacred by English colonists, foreshadowing the death of the ship's crew. There has been much debate as to the meaning of the multi-ethnic, multi-religious crew of the Pequod, and many scholars see it as a stand-in for the United States, a ship of state with a social hierarchy strikingly similar to that of America in the late 1840s into the 1850s. There were only 30 states at the time of writing, and there are 30 crew members of various ethnicities. And race was to the forefront of American politics when Melville was writing Moby Dick. America was divided. In the North, slavery was being abolished, whereas in the South, fugitive slave laws were becoming tighter. America was facing a crisis that would eventually lead to a civil war. At the same time, there was a new wave of mass immigration, and the population of the United States was rapidly expanding. Is Melville using the ship as a metaphor for a new type of nation, finding its strength through a coming together of its many different people?
What is worship? To do the will of God, that is worship. And what is the will of God? To do to my fellow man what I would have my fellow man do to me. That is the will of God.
It is the archaic writing style and the poetic intensity of Melville's writing that transforms the insane captain of a 19th century commercial whaler and his disparate crew into the cast of actors in a universal drama.
For there is no folly of the beast of the earth which is not infinitely outdone by the madness of men.
Moby Dick switches endlessly between writing styles, from narrative adventure story to introspective monologue, with endless digressions and footnotes throughout. Many readers in 1851, expecting a seafaring yarn, were baffled by the style of Moby Dick, as it's written in a way that would later be more recognizable to a student of the works of Virginia Woolf or James Joyce. Out of nowhere, Chapter 40, for example, is written and laid out as a play. Chapter 32 is an exhaustive list of whales. And as noted, Chapter 42 is famously all about the whiteness of the whale.
Book, you lie there. The fact is, you books must know your places. You'll do to give us the bare words and facts, but we come in to supply the thoughts.
We know Melville did not outline his novels before writing them, and his other books were written without digression, so in these terms it is less a realistic fiction of the kind we are used to than it is an epic poem or a philosophical text. The digressions, which may appear to diverge from the central narrative, are integral to the novel. This is Ishmael's pursuit of knowledge as much as it is Ahab's pursuit of the white whale. And this is not so much a book about that quest as it is an experience of that quest. Now considered one of the great American novels, Herman Melville's masterpiece went largely unread during his lifetime and was out of print at the time of his death in 1891. The novel explores a wide range of complex themes, including obsession, madness, revenge, and the dangers of charismatic leadership. Themes that anticipate many of our contemporary conversations on the human condition in relation to democracy, capitalism, and environmentalism. Melville makes it clear that we create our own symbols, and we can interpret Moby Dick in so many ways. These are just a few ideas. After completing Moby Dick, Melville wrote to his friend and fellow author, Nathaniel Hawthorne.
I have written a wicked book and feel spotless as the lamb.
And with this vague and cryptic statement, Melville leaves us in the end unknowing.